Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about British culture regarding names, the use of names and naming of babies. And this is for non-British people, so it's a cultural lesson on using names and naming children, naming babies. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's start with the first point. Now, British people are quite strict about names in traditional British culture we're talking about here. So, you know, I actually did this yesterday. I asked a British person about these points and they didn't actually know. But this was a young person, you know, this was somebody who's just 23, 24, and he didn't actually know, you know, about these points. Now, I put that down to him being young and not having the experience yet of, you know, what traditional British culture is about using names. But the more we talked about it, the more he started to realize, yeah, actually that is right, you know, that what I was saying is correct. And it's very strict, you know, the British culture is extremely strict. Now, unlike American culture, they're pretty liberal about the use of names and certainly nicknames in particular. But the British really aren't. We're very strict about how we use nicknames and how people address us, you know, and the formality, let's put it like that, the formality of addressing people is a very strict protocol in the UK. So let's start with the use of what we call Christian names or first names. So first names in England, we have an expression, we're on first name terms. This is an expression that means we're relatively close with the person, close enough to use first names. So we would address each other using first names, which is, you know, it's a level of being close with another person, you know, to the extent where we would be comfortable using first names with each other. Whereas if that were not the case, then we would use surnames, and we would use a title and a person's surname. As far as nicknames are concerned, they're very rarely used. I mean, we have nicknames, two levels of nicknames. We have the first level is where our family, so mother, father, brothers, sisters, within the family, we would use nicknames for each other, but that's only within that close circle of close relatives, like very close relatives, immediate family relatives that would use that nickname. And it would normally come from one of the people within that circle who would name us, give us this nickname. You know, that's completely out of bounds for other people. You know, if someone were to use my family nickname, which is actually Si, you know, that's what my family has always called me, my mother, my father, my sister, and sometimes my grandparents, they would sometimes call me Si as well, but not very often. You know, it was usually just my immediate family, my mother, father and sister. If someone else were to call me that would make me feel extremely uncomfortable, and it would actually upset me. I would be offended by that, you know, if someone just started calling me Si. You know, that's not their right. They have no right to do that. They're invading my personal space. That's how I would look upon that. And this is, you know, pretty much every English person is like that, or British person is like that. The same can be said for the second level of nickname that we would often have. And that's a nickname we would often get given in school, you know, by our group of friends. You know, they would come up with a nickname, and based on our character, based on the way we look, based on pretty much anything really. You know, these nicknames can be quite spiteful actually, but it's a kind of term of endearment. It's a name of endearment that we would use. So my group of friends in school, they called me Jacko, based on my surname. You know, my surname is Jack, so they just stuck an O on the end and said Jacko. You know, that was my nickname. And that was okay, you know, I was completely okay with that. And anyone using that nickname meant that they were my close friend in school. And that also carried across to the army, you know, when I was in the army. Again, that was my nickname in the army. My nickname carried on over to the army as well. And, you know, I was completely happy with that. That again, as I mentioned before, it's kind of a term of endearment. So it means that these people are quite close to you, and that's a nice thing. But anyone else, they don't have the right to address me using either of my nicknames. You know, and I would never invite somebody to address me using my nickname. That's more to do with my age. You know, I consider myself as being a senior now, and, you know, to have anybody calling me by my nickname is not really suitable anymore, you know, at my age. So, you know, this is just a very British thing, and this is how we are. And, you know, to understand this is quite difficult to get your head around this, especially if you're from North America. I think possibly the Canadians are perhaps similar, but I think US citizens probably don't really understand this. This brings up the issue that has made the headlines just last night. It made the headlines in Thailand on the BBC about naming of Harry and Meghan's daughter. Now, the British, as I've already explained about nicknames, that's not something you take lightly at all with British people, and especially this term of endearment that was the Queen's nickname between herself and her husband. Nobody else was privy to use that, you know, and it was actually her childhood nickname. It was given to her by her father, King George VI, and her sister, Princess Margaret, she also used that name. She possibly was the one who coined that nickname in the first place, because she couldn't say the full name of her sister, Elizabeth. It was quite a difficult name for a child to say. So yeah, this is the origin of the name. I mean, people are divided on that, you know, whether it was Princess Elizabeth herself or Princess Margaret who coined that nickname. But either way, it was because children at that age, they find it very difficult to say the name Elizabeth. You know, that would be the same with pretty much any child. It would be a difficult name to pronounce. So yeah, that was the history of the nickname. And then it became a term of endearment between herself and her husband, the Queen Elizabeth, and her husband, Prince Philip. And it was a very personal thing for Queen Elizabeth and also for Prince Philip. And to have somebody else take that name and give it to someone else as though it was their right, British people really cannot abide by that. They cannot accept that in any way. You know, that is completely and utterly disrespectful as far as British people are concerned. I'm talking of the majority of British people here. I'm not talking about every person in the UK. They're not all of the same opinion. But the vast majority, as I've seen and read, are of this opinion. And the second objection they have is based on this name being a nickname. British people do not name anyone with a nickname as a name. It doesn't happen. In the US, I understand that's not really an issue at all. But in the UK, it really is. You know, this is based on British culture, and it really is not acceptable. And you have to understand the British, because they have a very long history and tradition and culture. And they're I'm going to use the term stuck in their ways. Well, they kind of are, you know, and that's not a bad thing, because it's their tradition, you know, and they place a lot of value on having this long history and culture. So nobody has the right to say whether that's right or wrong. Nobody has that right. You know, it is the way the British people are. Younger people, obviously, you know, we were all young once, and we didn't really see eye to eye with these strict values and traditions that were normal in our culture. But as we get older, we start to see, okay, that's kind of nice, and we start to see the value in it. you know, but young people generally don't. So, you know, I mean, it's the same with this whole woke movement at the moment. You know, this is just the young people having their say, you know, and expressing their views and their opinions. It'll soon die down. You know, this is not something that's here to stay. This wokeism and woke culture, it really isn't. You know, it's having its day now, and then it'll be gone before we know it. So I guess this kind of brings me to a point that I wanted to raise about culture. You know, every country has their own culture, and to base your assessment or your opinions on your own culture it's kind of normal, but you have to remember to judge others according to your own culture is what we call ethnocentric, which is a bad thing. You know, we should not do that. You know, we're basically saying, oh well, you know, our culture's right and everybody else is wrong. You know, that is not the case at all. I mean, you know, one culture, let's say, well, let's talk about China. I mean, they're the biggest country in the world, I believe, still, closely followed by India. So, you know, if we talk about their culture, well, the majority of the population of any one country have that culture. But then again, China is such a huge country. It has lots of regional cultures, sort of divided, or subcultures within the one country's main culture. And they're sort of, you know, pretty much every country, I guess, of a certain size has that, you know, and they have sort of regional differences within their culture. And that's very normal. But to basically say, well, everybody else is wrong, you know, my culture's right, that really isn't acceptable to anyone, anywhere. Okay, we have to open our minds, open our hearts, and accept others have different opinions, different values, and different traditions to ours. You know, and the sooner we can do that, the more accepting we can become of other ethnicities and races and values and everything else. You know, I can see a huge rain cloud coming while I'm talking. I'll just show you that. It's nice and dark, and it's coming right this way, so I better get a move on and stop talking so much, eh? Alright, well, thanks very much for listening in, and yeah, hope to see you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye. Shout out to Rachel at lunabands.co.uk. Thanks very much for this gift. You see this band here. Very nice. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Rachel.